Hey guys, so I've done a video or two about Back to the Future, and to this day, it is still one of my favorite trilogies. And like I said, even though trilogies will have problems, some of them can still be masterpieces. Just the fact of how well they hold up over, in this case, what is it? Back to the Future 3 was 1990, so it's Back to the Future's been around a while, and it still holds up. The effects are still good, and it's just crazy how well it holds up. Obviously, there's huge problems story wise or whatever, which I'm going to bring up. So, Back to the Future 3 is so twice throughout the movie, Doc says that the future isn't written and the future is whatever you want it to be. And then I'm sitting there thinking, I mean, wait a minute. If the future isn't written and the future is whatever you want it to be, what was the point of Back to the Future 2? What was Back to the Future 2? Doc shows up, you know, to the future. Your kids, Marty. Something's got to be done about your kids. And then they go into the future, and the whole point is to stop Marty Jr. from, going with Griff and I guess like robbing a bank or whatever it was. And then he gets taken to jail. Then his daughter tries to break Junior out of jail. She gets arrested, and so Doc brings him to the future to prevent all that from happening. But why? What was the point? If the future isn't written and the future is whatever you want to make it, then why was the second movie even necessary? Why couldn't the second movie been technically the third? The second movie could, like, think of it. At the very end of Back to the Future 1, you know, he goes back and, just say it's rewritten somehow to where the events of 2 with Doc in the air, with the DeLorean, in the storm. I mean, how great would have been? you know, he has to get back to 1985, and when he does get back there, him and Doc, whatever, and then it's a situation where they're in the, he's in the DeLorean, and they get struck by lightning, and boom, 1885. So the third movie could have been number 2 if they had worked the first movie a little differently. Because if what Doc says is true, then what was the point of going to the future anyway? I'm like, we saw firsthand that the future can be changed. In Back to the Future 2, we hear that Marty gets into a car wreck or just has an accident. They don't say really what kind of. Well, his mom says it, but Marty doesn't actually know what the issue was. He just heard from Doc that gets you. You can't let people make you. You can't go off every time someone calls you a chicken. That's what causes you to get into the accident in the future. And he's like, my future? What's wrong with my future? Um, so Doc doesn't tell him what happened, but we know what happens. He gets into a drag race with Needles, and as they're racing, a Rolls Royce pulls out in front of him, and Marty, crashes and hurts his wrist, and so. But we see at the end of Back to the Future 3, he was able to change the future. Instead of racing Needles, he decides, oh hey, I'm not going to be coaxed into doing this by being called a chicken or whatever. And as they see Needles racing off into the distance, you see the same Rolls Royce pulling out. They're like, oh my god, you know, I would have hit that Rolls Royce. So the future can obviously be changed. So why was Doc so desperate to get Marty into the future to change his future if it can be changed just through living life? Who knows? Maybe Marty and Jennifer wouldn't have even had kids. Maybe they would have broken up or whatever. Even if Doc had let the natural course of time go by like it should, who knows? I mean, he Marty had 2 different girlfriends. Obviously, joke since Jennifer was played by 2 different actresses. But does Doc know all the possibilities? He goes into the future and sees one thing. Obviously, he should know that's not every possibility. There could be the chance that Marty and Jennifer break up. There's a chance that maybe they don't have kids. Maybe there's a chance that they do have kids, but they don't end up coming out like Marty Jr. and the daughter. There's tons of possibilities. So why was Doc so hell bent on getting to the future to fix it? I mean, you can say, "Oh, Doc's just being a good friend," and blah blah. But if the future is whatever you make it, then there was no reason for concern. He said he went. He also said he went to the when they were back in 1980, the alternate 1985. Um, he shows a paper where he's committed. So, I mean, things like that could have easily been changed. If you have the foresight, you can easily change things, or you can just things can change just naturally through time. So I don't understand why the whole second movie was necessary. If I mean, don't get me wrong, and I say not necessary. It's great that it was made. It is a great movie. I'm saying in that universe, in the sense of time travel, and because when you really think about it, people like to put the blame on Marty for everything. It's like, oh yeah, well if he didn't go in the almanac and this and that, um, but if Doc had made it seem like, oh my God, we need to go to the future and save your kids, then it wouldn't have happened. Now, if you wanted to go to the future and get the hover conversions and Mr. Fusion, that's great. Because it seems like that kind of technology would kind of come about anyway. But when you have someone's life, it can always alter. I mean, who knows? Marty could have died before he got to that point. So for Doc to make a big deal about it, so that was one thing. And then the second thing that really annoys me is when he tries to convince Clara that he's from the future. He's like, "Oh, yeah, I have to leave," and she's like, "Oh, I don't understand. If you really love me, then you'll tell me where you're going," and blah blah blah. And he's like, "Okay, I'm from the future," and he's trying. He's like, I had to go back to the future, and I came here in a time machine that I created, and I have to go back to the year 1985." And of course, Clara thinks that he's kind of jerking her tits there because of her she's partial to Jules Verne. Um, but as a scientist, that's what he could have seen it as. He could have seen it through the lens of a scientist. Yes, they were lovers, but they were both scientists. He could have said, okay, she's a woman of science. If I show her at least the model, I mean, she didn't even have to see the DeLorean, but he could have shown her the model that he built of Hill Valley, um, or not the model of Hill Valley, but well, technically yes, but show the train track and all that. Um, but if she still didn't believe, she could have seen the DeLorean, and he could have easily said, "Hey, as a woman of science, I know you're going to want to tell people about this, and I know this completely blows a hole in what you thought science was, but I have to ask you, please do not tell anyone about this." And Clara, as a woman of science and as someone who loves Doc, would have kept her mouth shut. So showing her the DeLorean wouldn't have really had any repercussions. Now, you could say, oh, well, that could affect the future. The future is whatever you make it, remember? So if she kept her mouth shut and she just lived her life normally and just went continue on studying, you know, the moon and whatever else she studied, it would have been fine. Um, but that whole not really breakup, but the fight thing with her and Clara and Doc, all I had to do was say, she's a woman of science. Even if she doesn't fully understand what it is, I can show her that I am indeed telling the truth because I don't want to leave here with her thinking that I'm just wanting to break up and that I don't like her or don't love her. Like, wouldn't you do the same thing? I mean, if I was in Doc's case, I was in his situation, personally, me, I would show her the DeLorean. I would show her the DeLorean. Would it be good? I mean, even he considered even taking her to the future with him, and we can clearly see that she is with Doc in 1985 when they come back on the train to give Marty the the picture. So plucking her from 1885 and having her be able to travel throughout, it clearly wouldn't. So why didn't he just show her the DeLorean in the first place? And then this is just a little like a little nitpick, and it's kind of stupid. But at the very end, when he shows back up and he's in the steam powered train, which totally looks badass, um, Marty said, I never thought I didn't think I would see you again. And he's like, you can't keep a good scientist down. Besides, I had to come back for Einstein. Well, did he really have to come back for Einstein? Marty, returning to 1985, would assume that he's never going to see Doc again. He knows that Einstein is still at the lab. I think Marty, being a good friend, would look after Einstein. Even if he wasn't able to take him to his house, damn sure that Marty would go to the lab every day to make sure Einstein was fed, make sure he was taken out to go for a walk. Marty would take care of Einstein. He loved Einstein. And Einstein clearly had a love for Marty. So even if Doc never came back, he didn't have to come back for Einstein. He should know, Marty's in the future, and he's in 1985, and he'll take good care of Einstein. The Doc didn't have to come back just for Einstein. But like I said, that's nothing story-wise. It's just a little nitpick I had when I was watching. I'm like, because I was watching it last night, I'm like, wait a minute. Why would he come back for Einstein? I mean, I know it's his dog, but he knows that Marty will take care of him. It's not like Marty's going to get back to 1985 and be like, well, Doc's gone. Sure hope Einstein makes it. He's not going to say, oh, well, I hope Einstein fares well by himself. No, Marty's going to take care of Einstein for him. Um, well, Einstein, you're on your own, buddy. But, yeah, those are three things. The first two ones, the first one is a kind of a bigger plot point. It's like, well, if the future is what you make it, then why was the second movie even necessary, in a sense of why did Doc want so desperately to go into the future and prevent these events from happening? The second was the whole thing with him and Clara, like, okay, why didn't you just show her the damn DeLorean? I mean, she obviously found out time travel was possible, considering at the very end she's not only there, but, they've traveled to the future already. So I don't know why he didn't just tell her about it in the first place, when he was, telling her, like, oh, I gotta leave. And, yeah, with Einstein, how there's really no reason for Doc to worry. Marty would have taken care of Einstein. Uh, what are you looking at, butthead? Um, Now why don't you make like a tree and get out of here? It's leave, you idiot! Make like a tree and leave. You sound like a damn fool when you say it wrong. Uh, yeah, that's about as funny as a screen door on a battleship. It's screen door on a submarine, you dork. Um, but Back to the Future, I mean, the whole trilogy I love. There's, like I've said before, there's very few series or trilogies or whatever that really stand up still and hold up well today that I'm really passionate about. I love Back to the Future. I do. Back to the Future is one of those things that if I had the room in here, I would totally be filling it with, Back to the Future stuff, Lord of the Rings stuff, freaking Doctor Who stuff, but obviously got the fucking TARDIS behind me. So I love stuff with time travel. I really do. Time travel is one of those things that you can get so creative with. Um, Actually, one more thing. At the end of the movie, Marty asks him, so he's like, so where are you going now? Back to the future? He's like, no, I've already been there. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, Doc, there's a lot of future, right? I mean, I don't know how far you're going, maybe another 15 years, but you do know there's an entire span of human history that you could be going to. You could be going to Hill Valley in fucking 6324 for all we know. I mean, he said, oh, the future, I've already been there. There's a lot of future, buddy. A lot of future. I seriously doubt you've seen everything. Um, but yeah, that's just another little thing I realized. But yeah. So, is this a pointless rant? Yeah. But hopefully this was stuff you kind of realized or kind of wondered yourself. It's like, okay, if the future is what you make it, then why did Doc so... He's like, why do we need to go to the future? What? What, do we become assholes or something? Also, on a side note, Michael J. Fox, back in the 80s, if Yu Yu Hakusho was to be made into a live action, he could totally play Yusuke. He has got the... I think he would make a great Yusuke. So, I mean, that's kind of random. And if you watch Yu Yu Hakusho and you disagree, then I would love to hear your idea who would be a better Yusuke. But 1980s Michael J. Fox, I think would be perfect for Yusuke. Um, Hearing Michael J. Fox say spirit gun, that would be amazing. But hey, who knows? You could use the entire freaking cast of you could have Tom Wilson instead of being a jerk like Biff. You're gonna have him as Kuwabara. You know, you could have uh other people in the movie play the other characters. I mean, who knows? But yeah, Michael J. Fox would be a great Yusuke. Anyways, that's gonna do it for me. It's just some stuff to think about that I thought of. And if you think there is a reason why Back to the Future 2 was supposed to happen in that universe, let me know. Because, like I said, if Doc says that the future is whatever you make it and the future isn't written, then why did he need to go into the future to prevent this stuff from happening if things could have easily changed through the natural course? I mean, they went to 2015 and their current time was 1985, so they had a whole lot of time for shit to change. Like I said, Marty and Jennifer could have easily broken up. Marty could have died or something. Anything could have happened. So why was Doc so desperate to get to the future to stop these events from happening if the future is not written? So if there's a real reason why you think it needed to happen, let me know. But other than that, thumbs up, thumbs down. You guys know the drill. I'll see you guys next time. Bye, guys.